hyenas were as big as lions, and lions were 2 or 3 times larger. It was very, very tricky, very difficult to survive.
1 million years ago, survival wasn't guaranteed. The world was full of predators, hunger, and storms.
This makes us wonder about how humans came to use fire, when they stopped being afraid of fire, when they started cooking with fire, and now we're trying to explore so that we can understand not only when fire was first used, but how fire was used.
Yet somehow mothers, fathers, and children endured by turning fear into fire, stones into weapons, and care into strength. This is how life 1 million years ago shaped the instincts we still carry today. Buried beneath the shifting sands of New Mexico, archaeologists uncovered something both ordinary and extraordinary: the faint imprints of a woman and a child, frozen in time for nearly 23,000 years.
And so if we measure the amount of radiocarbon that's in a seed, for example, and we know how fast it decays, we can calculate how old the plant actually is. At the very bottom, where people were starting to walk around and where we have our lowest seed layer age, it's about 23,000 years old. And at the top, where the people were still walking around and where we have our highest seed layer, it's about 21,000 years old. So we basically documented 2,000 years of human occupation in this area at White Sands a long, long time ago.
At White Sands, researchers traced a journey stretching for miles. A woman carried a child across the wet, treacherous landscape. But this wasn't a stroll. The ground was unstable. The world around her was hostile. Towering giant sloths and dire wolves still prowled the plains. And then comes the haunting detail. The footprints push forward heavy and deliberate. But when they return, they are empty. No child. It suggests she carried the young one to safety, then turned back alone into the wilderness. These prints are some of the oldest direct evidence of human presence in the Americas. They don't just rewrite migration timelines, they capture something deeper.
Probably the most important track site in the Americas, both in terms of scale, geographical scale, but also in the frequency of tracks, and that's what's really special about it.
We were brushing out a set of sloth prints, and Matthew found the human print right inside the middle of the sloth print, and that's sort of what sealed the deal. Oh yes, you definitely have the megafauna and humans together. So that's sort of where the human side of the story all began.
A moment of sacrifice, a mother risking everything in a world stacked against her, and across the ocean, in what is now the Czech Republic, another discovery tells the same story. At Dolní Věstonice, archaeologists unearthed the 27,000-year-old grave of a teenager buried with older adults. The arrangement wasn't random. It suggested protection, mourning, a ritual to remind the living of loyalty and kinship. Among the remains, scientists even found traces of genetic abnormalities, signs that these ancient people didn't abandon their vulnerable. They cared for them, they included them, they remembered them.
And so we need to be able to find an area where the footprints are in the layers of sediment, where we can find something to date below and above, so we can basically constrain the age of those trackways.
These findings are echoes of survival and proof that humanity's oldest instinct wasn't only to fight or to flee, but to protect. If footprints can whisper stories of protection, bones scream the price of those protections. One of the most haunting examples comes from South Africa, the Taung child, a fossil of an Australopithecine, 2.8 million years old. At first, it seemed like a simple relic of evolution, but closer study revealed something chilling. Tiny puncture marks in the skull, perfectly matching the talons of an eagle. In that instant, the story changed.
This little skull is sitting there alone. There's no mandible, there are no parts of her body. That maybe leaves one of the greatest mysteries that this whole thing is going to say. And I don't have answers to that. I can't have answers to that, of why a child's skull has made its way into those deep, dark recesses. because it has not been washed in there. It didn't crawl in there. The body would be.
This wasn't a quiet end. It was sudden, violent, a predator swooping from above. Even today, large raptors have been documented hunting monkeys and small primates in Africa, and the Taung child suggests early humans were no safer. It forces a question. How often did desperate parents have to fight the sky itself, as well as the earth below, to protect their children? Fast forward to the Neanderthals. Their bones carry a different kind of violence, a story not of predators swooping from the air, but of brutal close encounters on the ground. Archaeologists have found injury patterns eerily similar to those seen in modern rodeo riders. Broken ribs, crushed limbs, signs of violent clashes with massive prey like bison and mammoths. These were not random accidents. They were the scars of survival, and within those scars lies a deeper truth. Neanderthals often stepped into danger, absorbing the blows meant for the vulnerable. Protection wasn't an abstract idea, something noble to aspire to. It was a necessity, a condition of life. Yet sometimes the most dangerous predators weren't beasts at all. They looked like us. In Spain, fossilized child bones dating back over 800,000 years revealed deliberate cut marks, slices made by stone tools. The conclusion is hard to escape, but it points to one chilling truth: cannibalism. And this was not an isolated case. Archaeologists have found similar evidence in France, in Germany, and even within later Neanderthal caves. Whether driven by starvation, ritual, or sheer violence, it suggests something unsettling. Humanity's earliest tribes were not only defending themselves against the natural world, they were defending themselves against each other. Being a parent in prehistory was never simply about nurturing, it was about becoming a shield, standing between fragile life and the relentless dangers that pressed in from every side. Living under constant threat shaped not only how they fought, but how they moved. For early humans, protection wasn't always about weapons. Sometimes protection was about position, who stood on the outside and who stayed safely in the middle. Across different archaeological sites, one pattern keeps emerging. Humans rarely walked alone. They moved as one, like living shields, groups forming protective units, placing their weakest at the center. At White Sands in New Mexico, the same place where a mother's lonely footprints once told a story of sacrifice, researchers found another trail. This one was different. A cluster of prints moving in parallel, adults on the outside, children tucked inside. It didn't resemble aimless wandering. It looked intentional, a formation, like an instinctive tactic against predators that could strike at any moment. And this wasn't an isolated case. Thousands of miles away at Laetoli in Tanzania, scientists uncovered some of the earliest human footprints, sealed in volcanic ash for more than 3.6 million years. What they found was striking. Variations in stride, depth, and spacing. Larger individuals flanking smaller ones, even adjusting their pace so the group could stay together. This wasn't random chance. It was choreography, an unspoken code of survival. Protect the young, guard the flanks, sacrifice speed for safety. To walk in formation was to declare, without words, we will not be taken easily. And yet, the further we dig, the clearer the picture becomes. Survival wasn't only about defending bodies, it was also about guarding something far less tangible: our identities, our memories, and the meaning that bound communities together. But survival wasn't only physical, it was also memory. Lessons carved not in footprints, but on walls. Long before weapons could guarantee safety, memory became humanity's greatest shield. And some of the earliest memories were painted on stone. For our ancestors, these weren't just pictures, they were lessons, warnings, and promises of protection. Cryptic symbols that may have carried the same urgency as a parent whispering to a child today: be careful, stay close, danger is out there. In Chauvet Cave, France, dating back more than 36,000 years, the walls come alive with lions, rhinoceroses, and mammoths. Entire scenes of hunt and predation frozen in ochre and charcoal.
We risk contamination. The climate would be disturbed so much that we could have alteration of the paintings. We don't want to take this risk.
To us, they look like art, but researchers believe they may have been something more. Not decoration, but education, survival guides, teaching the young how predators moved, how they attacked, how they were ended. Picture it, a child sitting by the fire, their eyes fixed on the painted leap of a lion, learning fear before ever stepping into the darkness outside. In El Castillo cave in Spain, a different kind of image appears. Handprints pressed into the rock, layer upon layer, stretching back over 40,000 years. What's striking is that most of these prints came not from men, but from women and teenagers. Some archaeologists believe these weren't random marks. They may have been rituals, protective acts, symbolic shields for the vulnerable. Each hand pressed against stone could have been both a prayer and a promise. We were here. We will keep you safe. Half a world away, in Bhimbetka, India, the rock shelters reveal yet another layer. Scenes scratched into stone show humans raising their arms against charging beasts. Moments of confrontation, bravery etched for all to see. These weren't just depictions of hunts. They were narratives of courage, retold to inspire children, reminders that fear could be met with defiance. These ancient paintings were not just stories, they were weapons of knowledge, arming future generations with memory before danger could strike. Of course, ideas alone weren't enough. When danger closed in, survival still came down to what you could hold in your hand. Formations taught unity, paintings taught memory, but survival often came down to what fit in the palm of a hand. For early humans, that meant stone. The Oldowan tools, first appearing around 2.5 million years ago, were more than crude blades for slicing meat. In the flicker of firelight, a single stone could shift its role. One moment a tool for cutting, the next a weapon for defending. Life or death could hinge on the swing of jagged rock. Archaeologists studying animal bones from this period have uncovered details that bring this danger into focus. Among the cut marks are fracture patterns that don't match hunting alone. Some appear to have come from desperate defensive blows, struck as predators closed in. In those moments, the only barrier between a family and annihilation was the sharp edge of stone. The Oldowan toolkit itself was simple, flakes struck from larger rocks, sharp enough to pierce flesh or split bone. But that very simplicity hints at something profound. These were not just instruments of survival, they were extensions of instinct. Fear could be transformed into action, desperation into defense, and over time, that instinct became more deliberate. By the Acheulean period, humans were shaping stones into hand axes with balance and symmetry, objects designed not just to function, but to endure. Every chipped edge reflects thought, planning, and purpose. Together, these tools tell a larger story. Survival was no longer only about running faster or hiding deeper. It was about reshaping the environment itself, crafting safety where none had existed before.
Just imagine a fire 1 million years old, while traces of that ancient fire have been discovered in a northern Cape cave.
Around 1 million years ago, deep inside Wonderwerk Cave in South Africa, traces of ash revealed something extraordinary. Early humans had learned to control fire.
This makes us wonder about how humans came to use fire, when they stopped being afraid of fire, when they started cooking with fire, and now we're trying to explore so that we can understand not only when fire was first used, but how fire was used.
To us, flames are ordinary. To them, fire was the difference between being prey and becoming untouchable. It wasn't just about warmth or cooking meat, though both transformed survival. Fire became something larger, a living boundary, a fortress of light drawn against the chaos of the night. Archaeologists excavating at Wonderwerk uncovered burned bones and plant ash, clues that people gathered to share meals around the flames.
Now this whole deposit here and extending over this whole area is actually comprised of decomposed grass. Our grass couldn't get into this cave naturally, and what it actually represents is the remnants of bedding that these early people were sleeping on.
But what's just as important is what fire made possible. For the first time, humans could rest without fear. They could tell stories, they could plan. The crackling glow didn't just protect their bodies, it gave them something even rarer: time.
The fact that we find a fire inside the cave and it dated about 1 million years ago, it's a pretty big find, because that possibly is the oldest secure evidence of having fire associated with human activity in an archaeological site.
That shift in mindset was revolutionary. Sitting around a fire meant more than safety. It meant community. For predators lurking in the dark, the message was clear. Here was a new player, powerful and untouchable. If stone tools were humanity's first weapons, fire was our first wall, alive, unpredictable, but under our control. It sparked courage, inspired strategy, and lit the path toward everything we now call civilization. In the brutal world of the Ice Age, weakness usually meant the end. Every injury, every handicap threatened survival. Falling behind meant being left exposed to predators and hunger. At least, that's what we might expect. But in Shanidar Cave, Iraq, archaeologists uncovered a different truth. The skeleton of a Neanderthal, nearly 45,000 years old, revealed a body broken by life. He should not have lasted long. And yet, he did, for years. How? His group refused to abandon him. His bones tell the story, wounds that had healed, signs of care when he could no longer hunt or defend himself. This means others must have shared food, helped him get around, and kept him safe from predators. In a time when every scrap of meat was precious, this wasn't charity. It was a deliberate choice, a recognition that compassion itself could be a survival strategy. This discovery reshapes our image of early humans and Neanderthals. They weren't only hunters and fighters, they were protectors too. By caring for the vulnerable, they created bonds stronger than muscle or stone. And that leads us to something even more profound. Evidence not of tools or weapons, but of emotions themselves. Not all survival stories are told in words. Some are pressed into ash, carved into stone, or carried for miles by hands we'll never see. They are silent, but they speak of protection, memory, and meaning. Take the Makapansgat pebble from South Africa. It's about 3 million years old, a simple stone shaped by nature to resemble a human face, yet someone picked it up, carried it across miles of rough ground, and kept it. Why? Perhaps it reminded them of kin, of a child.
They're increasingly being recognized by museums and galleries around the world. So we decided to link these two narrative points and tell a history of South Africa through artworks. So the Makapansgat pebble is the earliest object in the exhibition. It's 3 million years old. It was found near the remains of Australopithecus africanus, a very early ancestor of humans. And it's important, we believe, because it's not from the Makapansgat cave where it was found. It could be from a location up to 40 kilometers away. And the question is how did it get to that cave? And we believe it was carried by those Australopithecus africanus. Why was it carried there? We believe it was carried there because of the face-like features on the stone. Those features are natural. They've not been made by human hands. So the very earliest exhibit in the exhibition is the 3 million year old Makapansgat pebble. We then have a rock art panel that's between 1,000 to 3,000 years old. We also have contemporary artworks from 2013.
Or of something lost. It's a small act, but it suggests a big shift. Protection wasn't only physical anymore, it was emotional. Early humans were learning to guard not just bodies, but identities and connections. Then there are the Letoli footprints in Tanzania, pressed into volcanic ash 3.6 million years ago. Among them, a child's steps run between two adults. Their strides are close, protective.
Here you had these impressed footprints the first evidence of bipedalism from 3.5 million years ago, the only such evidence in the world. Had Mary Leakey not reburied this site in 1979, there would be nothing here today, nothing. It's a very susceptible site to weathering because the volcanic ash that's now hardened into stone is nonetheless still a very, very soft ash.
It is a site for humankind, but because it happens to be in our own country, we have the responsibility and the duty to preserve it for posterity, not only for Tanzanians, but for humankind. So it's very important to us. And that's why we made all efforts possible to get people who could assist us and work as partners to conserve it.
Almost like living walls shielding the smallest member from unseen danger. It's more than just a path across ancient plains. It's a snapshot of family, of guardianship in action. And at Olduvai Gorge, archaeologists uncovered stone tools alongside the remains of children. These weren't only knives for butchering prey. In desperate hands, they could just as easily become shields or weapons, last defenses against predators. Tools weren't just survival gear. They were promises of protection. Together, these traces form a picture. Stones, footprints, bones, all telling us the same thing. Survival was never a solo act. Long before fire, before symbols, before language itself, humans already carried the instinct to protect what mattered most. Fire pushed the darkness back. Tools gave us teeth of stone. But survival still needed one more layer, a place to retreat when the world pressed too close. At first, nature provided. Caves weren't just shadows in the rock, they were vantage points, high ground with narrow entrances that could be guarded. A family inside meant predators outside had to think twice. But humans didn't stop at taking shelter. They began to build it. In Eastern Europe, archaeologists uncovered huts made from mammoth bones, tusks stacked into walls, hides stretched across frames. These weren't scraps tossed together. They were deliberate fortresses, proof that survival wasn't only about fighting, it was about foresight and cooperation. Even on open plains where caves were nowhere in sight, circles of stone mark where shelters once stood. They carved out boundaries, spaces where wind, cold, and prowling predators could be held at bay. And shelter carried more than physical safety. It carried a promise. To step inside was to know, here you are safe. That simple promise gave humans something priceless, the chance to rest, to plan, to dream beyond the next hunt, because only when survival was certain for the night could tomorrow even begin to exist. The traces left in stone, ash, and bone remind us of something timeless. That survival was never just about the strongest. It was about care, sacrifice, and the will to stand guard over each other. And in that sense, the story of protection isn't ancient history. It's the thread that still binds us today.